And I've been so proud of him. He faced the biggest mess imaginable and an economy that was in awful shape. The month he was sworn in as president, we lost 800,000 jobs. 800,000. Remind our Republican friends when they talk about the recovery, remind them what we're recovering from. We're recovering from the last president and his economic policies. Now, the reason I'm here in Ohio is, you know it, and I'm going to repeat it. This is ground zero. What happens in Ohio decides the next president of the United States. I hate to be that stark, but that's the reality of it. And the good news is, we saw this coming. The good news is, when Karl Rove was building up a bank account of millions of dollars, we were building up an organization. And I've seen it all over the United States. I've seen it here in Ohio. I went up north in the Cleveland area, Medina County, Massillon, Brunswick, those areas, campaigning for the president and for Sherrod Brown. And now we come down here. I was in Cincinnati, and here we are in Dayton, basically campaigning. And everywhere I go, same thing. Big organizational headquarters, lots of people involved, dramatically more than the other side. That's the key to it, getting out the vote. And already, Carolyn was telling me, the early voting is powerful, very powerful, around the state and around this area in Montgomery County. And I just have to tell you, we've got to close the deal. Right. Got to close the deal. And when we close the deal in Ohio for the president and Sherrod Brown, we're on our way to one happy election night, November the 6th. We can get this done. We can. So, we gather here, not just as Democrats, but many of us, people of faith, many of us from Catholic background. I was talking to Broderick earlier when he said he was from Baltimore, and I said to a group down in Cincinnati, so anybody here kind of latch on to Baltimore and its significance for the American Catholic Church? You older folks do. The Catechism, right? The Baltimore Catechism. While all our Christian friends were reading the Bible, we were memorizing the Baltimore Catechism. And who is God? And we went through all that. That was kind of basically what it was all about, wasn't it? Remember that? Okay, what is Holy Chrism? Is a mixture of olive oil and balm blessed by the bishop on Holy Thursday, of course. You know, so we had to know all these things. But that is our background. Many of us, that's our background. For the younger people here, you're probably puzzling and saying, what is he talking about? Well, that's what it was. Generations gone by, raised in Catholic families like Joe Biden. And I want to tell you, in addition to being an extraordinary vice president, wasn't he good in the debate? In addition to being an extraordinary vice president, Joe Biden is an extraordinarily good person, genuinely good person. I could take a half an hour here, literally, and tell you stories of the kindness and compassion of Joe Biden. I mean it, real kindness and compassion for a lot of struggling people. He cares and he engages. We were supposed to go to Texas together a month or so ago for an event. It happened to be the morning after that dreadful shooting in Denver, and it was canceled at the last minute. And I left Andrews Air Force Base and was headed out to Nashville to catch another plane. Joe Biden calls me on my cell phone. I'm so sorry, buddy. We were going to have to spend the day together. Are you going to tell me about the Senate? So I said, no, I understand. And I said, I'll tell you why I'm sorry. I was going to ask you, if you would, to call the mother of my chief of staff in Illinois, Bill Houlihan, who's 90 years old. And he said, oh, well, I'll be glad to call her. Tell me something. I told him the whole story. And I won't give you the whole story, but it's a wonderful story. Bernal Houlihan, her husband was a disabled World War II vet, so he called her and talked to her for half an hour. She couldn't get him off the phone. He's that kind of guy. He really is a caring, wonderful guy. And the point I'm getting to is when he talks about this social contract and gospel, it's in his heart. And I think it's in all of our hearts. And we look at the contrast in this election campaign. If you wandered off on your cable and ended up watching the Republican convention in Tampa, you know, they were all about the so-called Opportunity Party. And the motto is, just remember, we're all in this alone. They talked about the builders who didn't need any help from anybody. They didn't need roads. They didn't need an educated workforce. By goodness, they're entrepreneurs. Get real. None of us do it alone. None of us do it alone. We do it because we're part of the American family. And we invest in that family. so that young people can go to college and get an education, so that there's an infrastructure, there's research, all these things. And they stand up there and talk about the builders, we did this alone. No, they didn't. We did it together. Whether it's winning a war or conquering competitors in the economy, we do it together. And I take a look at Paul Ryan. I know him a little better than some. For a year, we sat across the table from one another in the Bowles-Simpson Commission. It's all about reducing the deficit, a commission appointed by the president. And Ryan is a very bright guy. He's from Janesville, Wisconsin, a neighbor to the north of Illinois. And we talked about Janesville, and we've got some mutual friends, and we talked about Illinois. It was a very pleasant conversation. And then, when we come up with a balanced approach to dealing with the deficit, a bipartisan approach to dealing with it, he votes no. He votes no. 3 Republican senators voted yes. All Republican House members voted no. When you talk about a balanced approach that includes revenue and taxes. And then comes the Paul Ryan budget. And the Paul Ryan budget, I want to tell you, I agree with Sister Simone Campbell. Anybody remember her from the convention? God bless her. I met her like 2 hours before, brought her, we had a little event there, Catholics for Obama, and in comes this nun, this sweetheart of a nun, and talks about what she's done with her life, and the nuns on the bus, and moving around the country. And then she says to me, as we're leaving, she says, give me a hug. I thought, no nun has ever said, give me a hug. But I'm going up, and I gave her a hug, and she said, I'm talking at the convention tonight, so I hope you'll listen. I said, I'll be there. And I watched carefully as she came out on stage, and I thought, she didn't change from what she was wearing all day. She was just, here I am, take it or leave it, and gave this powerful speech about the gospel, faith, and translating it into the real world. The Paul Ryan budget is what she focused on, and she should have. The Paul Ryan budget, if it went through, and thank goodness it didn't, if it went through, would have been damaging to so many people, the most vulnerable people in America. Let me give you one example. I'll bet you Medicaid in Ohio is like Medicaid in Illinois. And here's what it is in Illinois. 1 out of 3 children in Illinois have Medicaid only as their health insurance. 1 out of 3. More than half of the births in Illinois are paid for by Medicaid. Prenatal care, delivery, and baby care for mom and baby, half of them are paid for by Medicaid. But that's not the most expensive thing for Medicaid. The most expensive thing under Medicaid are the seniors and disabled out of money in a nursing home. And when they're completely flat, busted, broke, they just have Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and that's it. So what does Paul Ryan's budget do? It reduces the amount of money for Medicaid by 37%, more than a third, 37%. Okay, Congressman Ryan, Vice Presidential candidate Paul Ryan, which group do you want to cut out? Kids for inoculations and examinations? Mothers, this is a pro-life issue, mothers giving birth to their babies, or the seniors who are in a position where they have no place to turn? When I hear our church talk about the priorities of life, and the priorities of life at the beginning and at the end of life, and I look at that budget and say, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You cannot do this, the Ryan budget, and really believe that you are standing for the position of the church on key gospel teachings. That's the way I see it. And I think most of us believe the same, and that's what Joe Biden was making as a point this evening. So there are many differences within our church. I have my differences with some of the leadership in the church, some of you may as well, but I still believe in this church. I believe in the men and women who have made this church. I believe in their mission. I believe in their message. I believe that they are living the gospel every day, and with no apologies, I'm a Catholic Democrat voting for Barack Obama. Well, my friends, we got our job cut out for us. I got to ask you, you've done a lot already, but we need a couple more hours from you, a couple more hours of your life. On the phones, knocking on the doors, it'll close the deal. It's a few votes here and a few votes there. It was less than 600 votes that cost Al Gore Florida, if you believe you're costing Florida. But it was less than 600 votes. 600 votes. So it's that extra phone call. Those of you who are elected, many in the room are elected, understand it. Elections can depend on 1 or 2 votes. As you get ready to leave, will you make the last phone call? I'm getting ready. Oh, I'll make one more. And that could be it. That literally could be it. That's how close this election is. So we've got this Hurricane Sandy headed for our coastline. The president is focusing on this natural disaster, which is exactly what he ought to do. He's not on the campaign trail, which many of us wish he could be, but, you know, he has things to do as president. But let's get it together. Let's understand the opportunity we have. This president of the United States, this man who stood up, put his hand on Abraham Lincoln's Bible, and became our president, has led us with the kind of determination, courage, patience, and values which we wanted in a president. I agree with that and hope you do. I look at the other side and I think it's a completely different world. It's a world that happens to believe that there are 47% of the people who should be discounted. That's not the world I live in. If I remember what we were taught, every life counts, every person counts, and you don't dismiss 47% because they happen to receive a Social Security check or a veteran's disability check. So thank you. It's great to be in Dayton. It's great to be near the campus of the University of Dayton.